This is eggnog, and here's one I made earlier.
Ooh,
So I'm just going to pour this in here now. So that's eggs
eggnog.
whisked together with sugar. And I have to say,
Ooh, yum.
it is absolutely marvelous. Welcome to the final Ashes Test review of the series here on Cricket and Cocktails. Australia have won the series 4-1 after beating England by 5 wickets at the Sydney Cricket Ground today. England did battle hard thanks in the main to a brilliant second innings century from Jacob Bethel, actually his first century in all first-class cricket. And even though England did subsequently take 5 Australian wickets during the chase inside of 13 overs at one point, the truth is they didn't have enough runs to defend. The victory target was 160. Looking back, England's first innings decline from 226 for 3 to 384 cost them dearly. Plus, they were always playing catch-up when Australia responded with a first innings 567. That's a lead of 183. Alex Carey settled the match in Australia's favour by driving Will Jacks through the offside for the winning runs. There was sharp turn and bounce for Will Jacks, but he didn't always have the accuracy, so you have to ask the question what might have happened on this pitch had a specialist spinner played. Of course, Australia didn't play a specialist spinner either, they left out Todd Murphy. I'll be discussing the results of this match, the series and the possible makeup of both teams going forward with Alan Bone and Ben Kosky. So let's get started. Ben, Alan, thank you for joining me for what feels like a fairly gloomy post-mortem from an England perspective, but there were some glimmers of hope, notably from Jacob Bethel. So can I get your feelings not only on the result of this match, but where you see this England team going between now and the next Test match, which will be in June at home against New Zealand? I'll start with you, Alan, and then you, Ben.
Well, obviously, Ben, a 4-1 scoreline is not, I think, what most of us were predicting at the start of this. And, there's a couple of players, I would say the main players who've come on and enhanced their reputation. Definitely Jacob Bethel, as you said. Um, Brilliant innings. We can talk more about him in detail, but he gets a massive tick in terms of solving the number 3 position, definitely in the short term. So he gets a massive tick. Josh Tongue is the other one who I think's really come through
Yes.
brilliantly in the last 3 tests, mystifying for that both of those were not chosen originally. But in terms of where England go, I think there's a lot of people that they need to be moving on from, a lot of players they need to be taking quite a firm decision on. We can talk about that in detail, but I would say there's 5 or 6 from this squad, due to injury and form and various things, who they need to be just drawing a line and saying time to move on. And they need to be quite definite about that. I think there are issues, obviously, around the management and the structure, as well. And I would say there is an issue about our captain and whether Stokes is the right man to take England forward. So it's all pretty disastrous if you look at it in those terms.
Yeah, it's not great, is it, Ben? Of course, the issue with moving on your captain is who else comes in. Harry Brooks, the vice captain, but has he really stepped up to that kind of role in this series? And if he doesn't do it, Ben, who does? And who else might be moved on before the next test against New Zealand?
Yeah, I mean that's a key question, Ben, is if Stokes is not going to continue as captain, who is the alternative? And I don't think there are very many options within the current England setup. For me, to answer your question, no, Harry Brook has done nowhere near enough to be considered as captain of the Test side at this stage. And I think this is a mistake England have made time and again, that there's never really a process when it comes to choosing a new captain. There's just an automatic coronation of the next man in line. And often you don't end up with the best person. So my feeling is if Ben Stokes is not going to continue as captain, then you look outside the current setup. You look at who has shown captaincy credentials in the domestic game. Ideally, someone who's got Test experience already, because I think it's probably quite difficult to come into the setup if you've not played Test cricket. But there are some candidates in county cricket, and I would say if you're looking in that direction, the obvious one would be a former Test opener who has just led his county to their first title in 15 years in Hasib Hamid.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not saying definitely him, but he would be, for me, in the conversation if you're looking to shake up the captaincy situation. I think there's one or two others you could look at in that. But as Alan said, it is one of the questions in the mix. And I think that there are a lot of other questions in the mix, of course. The management being, I think, the main one. The personnel, certainly. You look at the side that played in Sydney, and on performance, how many of those are, if you like, guaranteed their place in the side? And I would argue not all that many. Joe Root certainly is. Jacob Bethell certainly is after his spectacular innings in Sydney. Josh Tongue, you've mentioned, who certainly should be a big part of things going forward. Jofra Archer didn't play, of course, through injury, but he impressed, I think, earlier in the series. Um, and then really, I'd say everything is pretty much up for grabs, or
I
should
think
be
it
anyway.
could be. Alan, let's have a look at the role of Bryden Cast. Now, we've all talked about how expensive his bowling has been. He has taken wickets. He's sprayed the ball around, but he has taken wickets. He does deserve some credit for being the last man standing as far as England bowling is concerned. But he's not really an opening bowler, and nor was Potts on the strength of what we saw in the Sydney Test match. Could there be a role for Cast going forward as a third or fourth seamer with the express instructions to tear in as quickly as you can and ruffle up a few batting feathers, so to speak? Or do you have to just look on from him completely and bring another bowler in to accompany, presumably, Josh Tongue and Gus Atkinson?
Well, I think that should have been his role really from the start. And as you say, big raps for still being, on both feet and standing. Because I think from that first test, everybody else, literally, I mean, Atkinson, Wood, Archer, Stokes in this test, the others have gone for one reason or another. So actually staying fit is a massive thing, and for me that gets a huge tick going forward. And yes, I think you do stick with him, but you certainly don't give him the new ball. He averages 82 in as a new ball bowler in county cricket.
Yeah.
So I don't know what these guys are looking at, where they're getting their data and their information from. I mean, I think this last test probably you can forgive them a bit because there really wasn't anybody else who was still about. Although I would argue that, I mean, Tongue should have got the new ball in the games he
Yeah.
played, and Potts probably, well, on the evidence of what we saw, what wasn't match fit. But no, I think there is a role for Cast. Ultimately, he gets wickets. He may get them in slightly kind of odd ways, and he may spray the ball around, but he is not a new ball bowler. He bowls far too short for the new ball, particularly in Australian conditions. But yeah, definitely, there's a role for him going forward, certainly.
Yeah. I take your point about Potts as well. I mean, he does do a bit of new ball bowling at county level, but he was billed in some sections of the media, Ben, as being eighth choice. He hadn't played a serious game of cricket in more than a month at the time that he came into the test team for this Sydney test match. And it rather showed, didn't it? Awful lot of balls either well wide of off stump or well down the leg side. But that's not really his fault that he hasn't played cricket for more than a month. A lot of this comes down to planning and preparation. And I think one of the concerning things now is we've had quotes from the upper echelons of the ECB today saying, on the one hand, and I quote, areas to improve, and on the other hand, and I quote again, won't be told what to do. I mean, how do those two quotes go together? What does that actually mean, Ben?
I think what it means, Ben, is generally a failure to take responsibility, because it's clear as day to everyone that the plan, whatever it was, did not succeed. So to be talking about minor tweaks is really absurd. There has to be a wholesale change of the approach, the planning you spoke about. I mean, I think most of us were quite bemused as to how anyone thought that one intra-squad warm-up game could possibly be adequate preparation for an Ashes series, why they were wasting time playing a white ball series in New Zealand instead of finding some red ball experience, whether it was in New Zealand or somewhere else. Um, there's an awful lot of things there. I mean, and I think the word culture has been spoken about quite a bit. And for me, this is one of the biggest problems. You look at everyone, of course, has talked about Jamie Smith's dismissal at Sydney, and rightly so, to that long hop from Labuschagne just before the interval. For me, the biggest problem about that is I very much doubt there's anyone in that dressing room calling him out and saying, don't do that again or you're out. Because the message you would expect to be coming from this management is something along the lines of, well done, you've taken the game to the Australians, you've expressed yourself, all this sort of thing. And there's absolutely no sense of responsibility to your team. Um, and it's not the first time. I mean, I'm not
Mm.
sort of singling out Jamie Smith there. We've seen Harry
Oh
Brook do
no,
it
there
several
are other
times.
candidates, definitely.
There are
Mm.
many other candidates, but this for me is the biggest problem, and I can't imagine this of previous England teams, uh, or indeed any cricket team at a decent level of someone sort of throwing away their wicket, having done a lot of hard work, and not being absolutely castigated for it
Mm.
and told in
Mm.
no uncertain terms to improve. I don't think that happens.
No,
I
no, it
really don't think
doesn't.
that happens or will happen under this regime.
And there are other candidates for biggest brain fade, aren't there, Alan? I mean, let's go back to the second innings
Yes.
again. Zach Crawley offering no shot to a ball on the line of off stump. Earlier in the match, Harry Brook chases a wide one that he didn't need to play when he was on about 80 odd in the first innings. Will Jacks swinging across
Mm.
the line to his second ball when England were going quite well and looking like they were going to make a bit of a game of it. It's not just one individual, so that does point to a culture within the dressing room. If it was just one individual, you could say, well, it's just one individual having a brain fade, but it's more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it points to a culture, and there's got to be some accountability. I mean, Crawley, he's gone from playing too many shots, as you say, to playing none at all, and he's definitely on the out list as far as I'm concerned. You can't average 30 in 60 Test matches as an opener. 60, not 16, 60. Um, and people be told that you're sort of picking someone on potential and on what they might do one day at some point. So for me, he is straight out the door. Ditto Pope, whose technique just isn't up to it at this level. In terms of the brain fade dismissals you were talking about, I mean, Will Jacks, I don't know what he was doing. You come in against a part-time spinner, defend one, and then wallop the second one straight to the fielder in cow corner. I mean, this is just a complete lack of thought, as you say, and no accountability. Smith, this has been a repeated thing. He did this in the final test against India when there were 20 odd runs needed on that last day. He comes down the pitch, edges it to the keeper. No sense of I'm going to be the one to get this game won and done. That's not good enough at this level. And as England fans and supporters, we should demand and expect better of our team than this. And the thing that frustrates me about all of this is you don't mind your side losing to a great Australian team. The great Australian teams of the 2000s with the War brothers, Hayden, Langer, Ponting, etc., McGrath, Lee, Gillespie, Warne. You don't mind losing to guys like that quality. I do mind losing to guys like Weatherald, the replacement pace bowlers Australia have had to have in this series due to the number of injuries. We shouldn't have lost this series 4-1 to this Australian team. I'm not saying we should definitely have won, but in past tours, you can look at it and say whether they've played too much or too little or the preparation's not been right. It probably wouldn't have made that much difference. I think the frustration this time is with a few minor tweaks, this series, I think, would have gone very, very differently because this was a bang average Australian team. Really, really average. Um, and it should have been much more competitive than it was. So I'm ranting away, but it's very frustrating.
I do take your point. I mean, we did see during this innings, Travis Head, Jake Weatherald, they got off to a good start. Jake Weatherald had a little bit of good fortune on that DRS review. Again, the technology seems to be a little bit flawed
Oh
there,
God. Mm.
but that's not Jake Weatherald's fault. Then they had a little bit of a wobble for about an
Hmm.
hour, went from about 60 odd for no wicket to losing five in 12 or 13 overs. So there was a bit of vulnerability there. But fundamentally, England didn't have enough runs to defend, and they didn't get close enough to Australia's first innings. So, yeah, quite possibly an average side, certainly an average side compared to the great Australian teams of the 1990s and the 2000s. But in reality, they haven't needed to be a great Australian side to beat this disorganised and not very good England side. I mean, that has to be one of the issues, doesn't it?
I think it absolutely does, Ben. I mean, as Alan said, this is not a vintage Australian team. You look at their feared quartet of bowlers, Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, Lyon. Only one of those has played more than one and a bit tests in the series, and it has to be said was absolutely superb, Mitchell Stark. Um, so they were there for the taking. Similarly, I think you look at Australia's batting. If you took away the performances of Travis Head,
Yeah,
again,
three
a lot
centuries,
of
about
average
600 runs.
performances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So they were there for the taking, and I think the difference was just very simply that they applied themselves better. I mean, I found it quite heartwarming actually during the Sydney Test that you had a rarity in modern Test cricket with Australia's first innings. You had an entire day on which the team who began batting ended the day batting as well. And that's actually quite nice to see because that
Mm.
smacks of innings being constructed, of a position being established in the game, and ultimately that's what won Australia the game. They got the runs on the board first innings. I think England, we would probably agree, were having won the toss, should have been looking for 450 plus, and didn't get that. And again, yes, it was a story of what might have been because just with that little bit extra, it could have been a very different series as well.
Mm.
Mm. Definitely an Australian team in transition. I think that probably is fair to say. The bedrock of the team, Mitchell Stark, unquestionably player of the series. Travis Head, outstanding, 600 runs in a series where most people struggle to average in the 30s. Uh, Alex Carey, brilliant behind the stumps, very valuable runs as well. And we have a late introduction into the Australian team, a late introduction as far as this series is concerned with Beau Webster. So as this Australian team is in transition, can you have both a batting all rounder that bowls off spin in Beau Webster and a sort of medium fast bowler that bats and is a terrific fielder in Cameron Green in the same 11? Is that one of the selection issues Australia face in the not too distant future?
I don't think Cameron Green is going to quite make it at this level. I just think he looks a very talented player. I think I said in the previous one of these, he's got this fault with his batting technique, which didn't really show up so much on this flat pitch of just planting this foot forward and then either playing round the front pad or fishing around outside off stump. That will be found out and has been found out even in this series. And I don't think he's a good enough bowler to be a sort of bowling all rounder within the team. So I don't think he's the long term answer for them really. But we'll see what happens. But Beau Webster has certainly done himself lots and lots of favours. And they've got a tour of Bangladesh coming up. And anywhere that you would want kind of a second spinner
Yeah.
and someone to get runs down the order, you'd have thought he'd have been a great candidate for that.
Yeah, I think he played very well. There's going to be another vacancy coming up as well, Ben, because we know that Usman Khawaja has played his final Test match, got a very good send off. He's had to deal with a lot of flack throughout his career for various reasons that have been well documented. So there is going to be another vacancy in the order somewhere. So could there be a way back, perhaps for Josh Inglis, or maybe one or two other players that we've seen that have done well in Shield cricket but haven't featured in this series?
Yeah, I think Josh Inglis is one that will certainly be in the conversation. Didn't really tear up any trees when he played in this Ashes series, but you could argue he was batting down the order, probably not given the best chance to shine. I think the interesting thing with Kawaja's retirement, of course, is that up until this series, the Australian selectors will have been looking at that and thinking, well, we need to find another opener. And of course, during the course of this series, they, by chance, if you like, found a
Yeah.
very effective opener in Travis Head.
A lucky back spasm, wasn't it, really, from their point of view?
It
I think
absolutely
it was
was.
billed as the luckiest back spasm ever, I think,
Yeah.
or words to that effect.
Every team needs one. It's about the only injury England haven't had is a back spasm, isn't it? Or
Mm.
has anyone...
That's what's been missing, I think. So, but I think so. That's the interesting situation is now that they'll be looking at it, thinking, well, do we need to find another middle order batsman? They may even still be thinking, do we need another opener? Because I think it's probably fair to say Jake Weatherald got his opportunity. Certainly wasn't a failure, but I can't really say that he's made a watertight case for his
Not
continued
yet.
inclusion either.
No.
Um, so there's probably going to be quite a few people in the mix. Of course, Constas is someone who's been involved and then was left out. Um, Inglis you'd mentioned, who certainly is one there, and then I suppose there is that question of whether they can find a role for Green alongside Webster. But I tend to agree with Alan on that. I don't think at the moment he's suggested that he can be an all-rounder that's strong enough in either suit, really. And so yeah, so I think at the moment, looking at the players who've been involved, then Inglis is probably the one. But there are other factors on the horizon, I think, for Australia. Of course, at some point they've got to think about who will take over those or fill those big boots of Nathan Lyons as their frontline spinner. He's not getting any younger. Of course, their seam bowlers are not getting any younger either. Uh,
That's true.
but
Yeah,
uh, but they do seem to have depth in there. I mean, I think
definitely.
worth highlighting that they were without Cummins and Hazelwood for most of the series, and the likes of Scott Boland, Michael Neser, I think, stepped up superbly well at
Yeah.
various times in the series.
I mean, these are experienced bowlers. They'd played quite a bit of Shield cricket going into this Test series. England hadn't had even remotely a comparable amount of preparation going into the Test series, and I think that showed. I think England did look undercooked, and Australia do have some good resources. I'd like to pick up on the issue of spin. I was fully expecting England to leave out their spin bowler simply because Bashir has been anonymous in this series anyway. They didn't play him at Adelaide, where I thought he was most likely to play. But I was quite surprised Todd Murphy didn't play for Australia. And in fact, I read a quote somewhere that said that this is the first time since the late 19th century that no spinner has been involved in a test match at the SCG. And we did see quite a bit of help for Will Jacks when he was bowling. But of course, he's not a specialist spinner and he doesn't have the accuracy. So that does beg the question. And I'll ask both of you this: what might have happened had there been even one specialist spinner on either side? Would we have gone into a fifth day?
Well, I think Australia, it looks to me like they packed the batting in this match, didn't they? With Stark down at 10. And I think they probably took a decision. Fine, there was the issue of we think the seamers will get the job done. But I think also what Steve Waugh used to call the mental disintegration. I think they thought against this England team who crash bang wallop when they bat and haven't got great depth in the bowling, if we just grind them down and bat and bat and bat, that's going to be good enough almost regardless of the bowlers that we have and whether we have a spinner or not, to get the job done. And it's been proved to be the correct decision. I mean, from England's point of view, it looks ridiculous now in hindsight to have only had one main spinner in the squad to start with and have not played him at any point. But you've got to have played a spinner in Adelaide, and you've got to really have played a specialist spinner here, given the problems with your pace attack. From England's point of view, so that's a big cross in the box of the selectors for not having. I mean, I think there's a number of areas where not having a second spinner, not having a reserve opener, not having a second proper wicket keeper. So there's no sort of competition within the team or within the squad for these key places if people are out of form, or you need another option. So it's pretty hopeless, really.
I think if you look at the spin option, I think one of the issues you've got, certainly in county cricket, is there aren't, and you'll know this, Ben, that there aren't really that many pitches in English county cricket these days that encourage spin bowling. So not only have you got a spin bowler in the England squad that doesn't play an awful lot of county cricket because he's had a sort of a nomadic existence traveling from one county to the other, you also don't have many pitches that assist spin bowling. It's not like the early days of Monty Panesar and Graham Swan, where you could usually count on a few wickets at Northampton that favoured spin bowling. That doesn't really happen an awful lot, does it?
No, you're right there, Ben. And another factor, of course, with the domestic setup is the schedule. Is that very rarely are we having red ball matches played at the best time of year for to be conducive to spin bowling. As we know, the county championship tends to be concentrated on April, May, and September. And so when the pitches are likely to be drier and more helpful to the spinners, there's not a lot being played there. So it is a big problem, but I think Alan has sort of touched on one of the big failings of this England setup, which is the way they view specialist skills. And I would argue spin bowling is one of those, and wicket keeping is another.
Yeah.
They do not look at who is the best in those skill sets. They look at who can do, they think, an adequate job in those skill sets at the same time as scoring as many runs as possible, as fast as possible. And that is the bottom line. And that is why we, I think, end up with these flawed selections. That is why we've ended up with Somerset's third choice spinner going as England's first choice spinner and then suddenly becoming not even that. That is why we end up without a proper wicket keeper in the squad. And I say a proper wicket keeper. Jamie Smith has improved in that regard. He is not a proper wicket keeper.
And you can kind of see that. Sorry, Ben. I mean, you can sort of
Yeah.
see that when they're out there. You know, you want your keeper kind of getting everybody going with some confidence and some energy, in a sense that, you know, I'm the guy who's leading the kind of fielding effort of this team, and I never hear from him on the stump mic.
Yeah,
Like, I don't see any sense of energy. I don't see, when there's a review, any sense of him taking some ownership and saying go for it or don't go for it. I mean, they wasted 2 reviews the other day on the Night Watchman, both
Yeah.
of which failed. But you know, it's
And that wasn't coming
sort of
from Jamie
engine room
Smith.
of
That was other fielders sort of
yeah.
making the case, wasn't it? So
Yeah.
I think that's a very valid point, and you compare that with Carey, who is far more vocal,
Outstanding.
and other past Australian and English wicket keepers who are more of a presence. And you know, and this is not a fault of Jamie Smith. He's still a young player. He's still learning his game, and he's doing it in the spotlight of Test cricket. It is entirely the fault of the selectors, of Rob Key, of Brendan McCullum, because they take this short-sighted approach. And I think there's always this attitude in selection that these skills are secondary. That as long as someone can do it, that's fine. And this is what I mean about the change of culture. You need to be looking at who can do the best job as a test spinner, who can do the best job as a wicket keeper, etc., etc. And the rest of it really should take care of itself.
The frustrating thing is there have been players available to England through the England Lions that are specialist openers and specialist wicket keepers. We had Emilio Gay, Ben McKinney, James Rue. We're down to the last 3 or 4 minutes. So before I introduce my cocktail, my final question to both of you, and I am putting you on the spot slightly, I want you to give me your 11 based on what you know and what you've seen for the England team against New Zealand in the first test of that series in June, and then I'll introduce my cocktail.
Who we would choose, or who
Who
we
you
think
would
they will
choose.
choose, who I would choose. Oh
yes.
gosh. Well, I would go for one of the new openers, probably Ben McKinney. I would probably just about stick with Ben Duckett because I don't think you can change both openers. Bethel at 3, obviously Root at 4, Brook at 5. Um, Stokes, if he's fit, at 6, but probably not as captain. A new keeper at 7. Um, Identity TBC. I would keep in terms of the bowling. The bowling, I mean, I can't because it depends who's fit and who's walking, who's up and about. If people are fit, I'd keep Archer, I'd
Yeah.
keep Atkinson, I'd keep Tongue, and I'd keep Cass. I would be looking to bring on Rihan Ahmed in terms of the
Yeah.
spinning. Who else? So anyone who's not in that has basically been binned off, as far as I'm concerned, from this shambles.
No, fair enough, Alan. Over to you,
I mean,
Ben.
I'd like to change both openers, but I just haven't quite got the confidence to sort
Yeah.
of do that because I think that's too. Anyway, yeah.
Well, that's pretty bold, Alan. I'm going to try and be more bold. I would
Oh,
change both
gosh.
openers.
Okay.
Okay.
I think Ben Duckett's not really been talked about, but he's had a very poor series. He looks scratchy, hasn't made the scores. So I'm going to go with a return to either Hamid or Sibley.
Mhm.
I would certainly go with a younger player alongside him, like Ben McKinney. Bethel stays at 3, Root
Yeah.
stays at 4. I would drop Harry Brook. I think he needs a spell out of the team, and I don't think he should be guaranteed his place in the side. I would leave him out. I would like Rian Ahmed to come in, possibly at 5, primarily as a batter, but a very useful spin option as well. Stokes stays in for me if he's fit. Wicket keeper, I think definitely needs changing. My preference would be, I mean, I've always felt Ben Folkes is the best keeper around, but that ship seems to have sailed. So I would go with
Yeah.
someone like Ollie Robinson or James Rue.
Yeah.
Bowling wise, I couldn't argue with your lineup there, Alan. Again, depending on who is fit, but if someone
Yeah.
is not fit, I would like to see Sam Cook given another
That's
opportunity.
a good
Yeah, that's the
shout.
name I should have said as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, gentlemen. We have reached the end. So I'm briefly going to introduce my cocktail. It's a bit cold. So this is a hot toddy. So it's got bourbon, honey, lemon, and cinnamon in it. It's absolutely lovely. And I'd like to thank both of you for your contribution to Cricket and Cocktails. And hopefully we'll go again at some point in the summer. So thank you very much and cheers. It's absolutely freezing here. We're in a January cold snap in most parts of England, including this one. So with that in mind, this cocktail is a hot toddy. There are many versions of a hot toddy. This is one of my favourites. You start with 2 fluid ounces of bourbon, that's 50 millilitres. So we pour that into our glass. In here, I've got 2 tablespoons of honey, which I've mixed with 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. So we pour that in there. Make sure you get all of the honey, some of it sticks, and then just give that a good mix. Lovely. And next, we top it up with simmering water. So that'll be about 2/3 of a cup of simmering water. So get that not quite to the brim because we've got a few more things to add to it first. We'll give that a bit of a mix as well. Make sure you get all that honey goodness. And then for decoration, a couple of pieces of lemon. 1, 2. And we also add a cinnamon stick. And if that doesn't warm the cockles of your heart, nothing will. Until next time on Cricket and Cocktails, cheers. That's a wrap here on Cricket and Cocktails for this series. This series began with promise for England against what appeared to be an Australian team in transition. But transition or not, this Australian team have been plenty good enough to retain the urn convincingly. It doesn't feel like there are going to be any changes to the England team or the England management currently, and that may in part be down to the schedule. 2 weeks from today, England play Sri Lanka in a series of limited overs matches, and after that they're straight into the T20 World Cup, again in Sri Lanka. The next England Test match is not until June when they're at home against New Zealand, and I wonder what the team might look like then. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye for now.